Have you ever thought about how a revolutionary idea, something that completely flips society on its head, can actually survive for thousands of years? Well, today we're diving into exactly that. We're looking at a spiritual revolution in ancient India, a time when radical thinkers had their beliefs, well, literally carved into stone. So, our story really kicks off with a bit of an archaeological mystery. We're talking about this magnificent, silent structure that held the key to a completely forgotten era. And when it was found, it left its discoverers absolutely scrambling for answers.
Okay, so here it is. This is the Great Stupa at Sanchi. And let me tell you, it is so much more than just a beautiful monument. Its discovery was the key that unlocked an entire forgotten history, a time when people all across India started asking these huge, profound questions about the very meaning of life.
The story of Sanchi is really a story of survival. It's incredible. European powers were itching to carry off its magnificent gateways for their museums back home. But then, two local rulers, Shah Jahan Begum and her successor, Sultan Jahan Begum, made an absolutely brilliant move. They funded its preservation, and instead of fighting, they offered the Europeans perfect plaster copies. This saved the original masterpiece from being totally dismantled and shipped away. So you've got to wonder, right? Why was this structure so important that it needed this kind of fierce protection? Well, to get that, we have to rewind. We're going way back to the world it came from, the 6th century BCE, an age of some really profound questions. And here's the thing, this questioning wasn't just happening in India. It was a global phenomenon. Back in India, as new cities and powerful kingdoms called the Mahajanapadas started popping up, all the old certainties began to fade. People were asking the big ones. What's the point of it all? Is there anything after we die? What is our place in the universe? A lot of this questioning was really a reaction to how religion was changing. You see, the early traditions had these simple, collective rituals for the whole community. But over time, they morphed into these super complex, expensive affairs that only the wealthy could afford, all controlled by priests. This just reinforced a really rigid social hierarchy, the caste system, and a lot of people started feeling completely left out. So, in response to all this, a new wave of thinkers comes along and creates these texts called the Upanishads. And these guys, they totally turned away from all the fancy rituals. Instead, they started asking much deeper questions, exploring these huge ideas like karma, rebirth, and the connection between your individual soul, the Atman, and the ultimate reality, or Brahman. And here's the crucial part. They challenged the whole idea that you could only achieve salvation by paying for expensive ceremonies. Okay, so this deep questioning sparked an absolute firestorm of debate. I mean, you had thinkers and teachers traveling all over the land, gathering in groves in these little huts called Kudagar Shalas, just arguing and debating the nature of reality. It was a true, vibrant marketplace of ideas. 64. Just think about that number for a second. Buddhist texts claim there were 64 different schools of thought buzzing around, each one offering its own unique answers to life's biggest questions. It was this incredibly fertile intellectual landscape. And out of all that creative energy, two major ideologies really took hold and would go on to shape the course of Indian history: Jainism and Buddhism. So what made these two new paths so revolutionary? Well, here's the game changer. Both Mahavira and the Buddha offered a radical alternative. They completely rejected the authority of the priestly texts and, this is huge, the caste system. They basically said, your worth doesn't come from who your parents were. It comes from your actions, your karma. Now that was a message of liberation that absolutely everyone could get behind. And this brings us right back to our mystery at Sanchi, because now you have to ask, how do you take these profound, world-changing ideas and express them, not in words, but in solid stone and earth? The answer was the stupa. At its core, a stupa is basically a sacred mound, a heap, often built over the relics of the Buddha or his followers. And the story goes that after the Buddha's death, the Emperor Ashoka, who was a passionate convert, ordered stupas to be built in every major town and city. It was his way of spreading the Buddhist teachings, the Dhamma, all across his massive empire. But look, a stupa is so much more than just a mound of earth. It's like a cosmic diagram, a 3D map of the universe, carved in stone. That big dome, that's the cosmos. The square railing on top, that's the abode of the gods. And that mast shooting up from the center with the little parasols, that's the axis connecting heaven and earth. Literally, every single part of it tells a story. Now, here's something that might surprise you. If you go to Sanchi today, you'll notice something is, well, missing. There are no statues of the Buddha himself. And that's because in early Buddhism, the Buddha had specifically forbidden idol worship. He saw himself as a teacher, not a god to be worshipped in human form. So, how on earth did the artists tell his story? Well, they got incredibly creative. They developed this ingenious visual language. Instead of showing a person, they used powerful symbols to represent key moments in his life. The Bodhi tree? That's his enlightenment. A wheel? That's his first sermon, setting the wheel of law in motion. A horse without a rider? That symbolizes him leaving his palace for good. The whole stupa becomes a narrative, a story told in stone without ever once showing his face.
But of course, the story doesn't end there. Ideas never, ever stand still. As Buddhism spread far and wide, it started to change. And this evolution, it would lead to brand new art, new beliefs, and it would even inspire major transformations in other traditions like Hinduism.
Which brings us to a really fascinating question. If the early Buddhists didn't make images of the Buddha, then why are Buddha statues some of the most recognizable religious icons on the entire planet today? Well, the answer lies in a massive transformation that happened inside Buddhism itself. So around the 1st century CE, Buddhism basically split. On one side, you had what was later called Hinayana, the lesser vehicle. They stuck to the original teachings, viewing the Buddha as a great human teacher. But then this new movement emerged, Mahayana, the greater vehicle. They started to see the Buddha as more of a divine savior. They introduced this incredible idea of bodhisattvas, these enlightened beings who stick around on Earth to help others. And this school, they were the ones who started creating the statues and images of the Buddha that are so famous today. And this wasn't happening in a vacuum. At the very same time, Hinduism was going through its own evolution. You've got new stories being written, and this idea of a divine savior becomes super central, with gods like Vishnu and Shiva taking on various forms. And, just like what was happening in Mahayana Buddhism, followers started building the very first temples to house images of their gods. And all this brings us back to just how fragile history can be. It's really a tale of two stupas. We know the story of Sanchi because it was protected and preserved where it stood. But then you have the incredible stupa at Amaravati. It suffered a totally different fate. It was taken apart piece by piece. Its stunning sculptures were hauled off by officials to decorate their homes and offices. Its original story was scattered to the winds, its grandeur almost completely lost. The stories of Sanchi and Amaravati really lay out a profound choice for us, don't they? These ancient structures are more than just ruins. They're libraries written in stone, full of the answers people found to life's biggest questions. It really makes you wonder, how do we make sure these incredibly important stories aren't lost to time?